All right, so I am officially up here in DC for the new job with Breaking Points, and I had to take basically almost a week off of the channel in order to just get all of my stuff moved up here from Atlanta, but I'm finally here. I got the setup going, obviously still working on some of the background and all of that stuff, but going to be able to be making much more consistent content for this channel. And to start us off here, I actually have some pretty big things that are unfolding here in Washington, DC in regards to who is going to be the next Speaker of the House, obviously in the aftermath of the Democrats losing the midterm elections to Republicans in the House of Representatives. They held on to the Senate, but now today basically we are having this huge vote-a-rama or a vote session to decide which Republican is going to be leading the charge in the House. And it looked like Kevin McCarthy obviously was the favorite for this position, but now we have some updates that are showing that there's definitely been some breaks in the caucus, and he actually has a lot of defectors within his own party that could completely prevent him from actually being able to take up this position. So before we get to some of the people who have been basically breaking away from his coalition and pushing for somebody else, I just got a rundown here in this thread from Kyle Stewart in terms of how this is all potentially going to unfold. Okay, so he starts off here saying, when the 118th Congress convenes tomorrow at noon, the first action for the House will be electing the new Speaker. He says, for 100 years, the majority party has elected their nominee on the first ballot. He says this year could make history. Okay, so again, a 100-year gap, I think it was back in 1923, I guess it was the last time that there was an actual serious pushback from within the party that was in power within the House of Representatives to where they couldn't get the Speaker through on the first round. And it looks like that's exactly what's going to happen now again 100 years later. So he continues, to become the Speaker, Kevin McCarthy needs a majority of members present to vote for him, which makes the magic number 218. That number obviously can fluctuate if any members vote present or don't vote at all. So we might not actually need to hit the 218. It could be something a little bit lower than that. And he says the House has to choose a Speaker before moving to any other business. So it's not even like they can just put this off, obviously. And if McCarthy does not win on the first vote, the House will continue voting until McCarthy or someone else does receive a majority. And the last time, of course, that this happened was 1923, 100 years ago. He says that members vote via voice, meaning when their name is called by a clerk, they verbally announce who they are voting for, and members can vote for anyone, even people who aren't part of the House of Representatives, or they can vote present or choose not to vote at all. So this is where we get into a little bit of like a hiccup for me in terms of like what the actual strategy is here from some of these Republicans. It's more disproportionately like right-wing Republicans like Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz that have been pushing back against Kevin McCarthy, and we're going to get to a couple different clips here of them describing their positions in a second. But basically the follow-up question is like, okay, well, so what's your follow-up plan, right? Are you just trying to get some sort of concessions out of Kevin McCarthy, some committee positions or something like that in order for him to get your support? Or are you actually trying to push somebody else other than Kevin McCarthy, presumably somebody who is much more on the fringe right wing of the, Republican Party? Not that they're all not, fringe right wing extremists, but, somebody else. Are you actually trying to make that push? And if so, who would that actually be? Is there any legitimate path forward in order to get that person elected with a consensus vote and to get every other Republican to flip against McCarthy? It just doesn't seem like that's something that is likely to happen. But he continues in this thread saying that there have been 14 instances where it took multiple ballots to choose a new Speaker. 13 of these were before the Civil War, and the last one was in 1923. And he says electing a Speaker can take a while. It took 133 ballots over the course of 2 months back in 1855 to elect a Speaker. I mean, hopefully we don't have to go through 133 ballots of that. I mean, that would just be honestly annoying to have to sit through, but it should be somewhat entertaining to see this inter-Republican Party, a civil war that's sort of been going on, obviously, between more of like the Trump wing and more of the establishment wing of the Republican Party. It's definitely going to be getting interesting here really fast, really quick, and you're going to see some shots that are thrown across the bow. But he says on 2 occasions, the House voted to change the rules and elect a Speaker by a plurality instead of a majority. That would be super interesting, honestly, because then it could just be a complete wild card. Anybody who managed to get a plurality, that could even presumably be a Democrat, which is why obviously I don't think that they would use a majority vote, Republicans, in order to actually get that type of a thing through. But he continues saying historically, The House has only held a few ballots each day, so if there are 3 or 4 unsuccessful attempts, which is presumably, plausible in this situation, the House could adjourn. So we might be into this for a long time. Okay, so listen, that's basically just the rundown in terms of like what potentially needs to happen in order for a speaker to be elected right now. Okay, so now we move on to some of the pushback that McCarthy has been getting. Okay, so here from Olivia Beavers, she says McCarthy acknowledges behind closed doors that there are likely 20 or so members who are going to be voting against him, not the original 5 estimate. Okay, so if you have 20 people who are voting against you, I mean, that's a lot of people you have to convince or maybe give like a carrot and a stick approach to each single one of them in order to get them to fall in line. So, I mean, he's definitely like fighting an uphill battle here. But we have another thing here on basically what McCarthy has been saying behind closed doors. So they say here from Mariana Sotomayor, she says, so here's what's happening in the GOP conference room. Leader McCarthy went scorched earth on his detractors, telling all Republicans that he's done negotiating, and he yelled, "God damn it," as he rapped, followed by a literal mic drop. Okay, so he's out here, he's cursing, he's pissed, he's crying, he's shitting and pissing his pants, all of that good stuff. You absolutely love to see it. And again, I mean, this is something that has been in the works for a long time, since we knew that Republicans were going to take control of the House of Representatives after the midterms. We knew that there was going to be some pushback, but I didn't honestly think that we were going to like get to this day where this vote was taking place and that he wouldn't have managed to like pull off some sort of backroom deals with each of these people who didn't want him to be speaker. I mean, this is just an absolute shit show here within the Republican Party. But another thing here that he added, they say Representative Mike Rogers says that anyone that votes against McCarthy doesn't get a committee, source in room tells me. Okay, so this is another interesting thing if this is true, right? Taking with a grain of salt that this is just one guy who's saying this, but if you're basically threatening that none of the people who vote against you are even maybe having a chance at getting one of these key committee positions, which is something that a lot of them have been focused on, right? Well, then that pretty much takes straight off the board the leverage that a lot of these right-wing people like Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert would actually have to extract concessions, right? So he's basically trying to call their bluff on, what potential demands that they would be asking for from McCarthy here. So again, this is going to get pretty interesting. So we got our first clip here of Lauren Boebert on why she is pushing back against Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker of the House. Let's go ahead and watch this clip.
And so now here we are being sworn at instead of being sworn in. And we could have had this solved months ago. I have been working every day to unify the Republican Party for the American people. And yesterday, we had a deal that was not a selfish deal in any way for Kevin McCarthy to get him the gavel on the first ballot. And he eagerly dismissed us. And so
Okay, so again, obviously not happy enough with, the current slate of concessions that Kevin McCarthy has been offering this coalition of people. But we had this addition here from Jake Sherman. Apparently, Lauren Boebert also said after the McCarthy speech, this is bullshit. Okay, so she's pretty pissed off, I guess, and so is Kevin McCarthy, apparently yelling at them and cursing at them behind the scenes. But now we have a clip of Matt Gaetz, who is also giving his perspective on why he's not supporting Kevin McCarthy on the first ballot here.
So just to be clear, none of what you heard in there from McCarthy was enough to get your support.
Everything I heard hardened my resolve that this town desperately needs change, and if it's a few of us who have to stand in the breach to force it, we are willing to do so for as long as it takes.
Okay, so, a couple different things here. Number one, we're talking about Matt Gaetz, right? Like, what exactly is this guy looking for in a speaker, right? Not somebody who has the most, hardened principles or core values or anything like that. So, what is he actually looking for from a speaker position? Is he just looking for some specific concessions for himself or other members of his, right-wing coalition within the Republican Party? I don't know, honestly. I mean, again, a lot of this is happening, like, behind closed doors, and we're doing a little bit of guesswork here. But, it should be interesting, to see a lot of these arguments that are going back and forth and what ends up happening. Are we even going to know who the Speaker of the House is today or the next day or, a week from now? Who knows? It just entirely depends on this civil war that is currently unfolding within the Republican Party, which leads me to a different point, which I also think needs to be noted here, which is, look at how Matt Gaetz and a lot of these other right-wing freaks within the Republican Party are using this moment to leverage their power, right? That's something that I would actually like to see. People in the squad, for example, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, the rest of them, right? Wouldn't it be amazing if we could have a press conference where they came out there and said a similar thing about Nancy Pelosi back when she was the Speaker of the House, right? We didn't have any of that. It was all kind of like behind closed doors and maybe like some mild pushback against, the old guard within the Democratic Party and public appearances, but it was never anything like that where they're coming out fiercely and firmly and saying, no, I absolutely will not support Nancy Pelosi for the Speaker's position, right? We never saw anything like that, which, is kind of depressing to say that, or to see that, we have this ridiculous right-wing faction within the Republican Party that is willing to use moments like this in order to, bolster their own power or extract hard concessions from the leadership. And we just don't really have that equivalent on the left. They pretty much just roll over whenever there's some sort of battle like this, or they make some sort of behind closed doors deal that we don't even necessarily know the full parameters of. So honestly, that aspect of it is kind of pathetic to just see that dichotomy, that comparison right there. But listen, I mean, probably we're going to know pretty soon, I'm guessing. I mean, this started taking place at 12. It's currently about like 1 o'clock when I'm recording this almost. So, I mean, it should definitely be interesting to see how this shit show unfolds. And I will definitely keep you guys updated if, whatever the outcome is, whether it's Kevin McCarthy successfully becoming the Speaker, maybe he gets some concessions to these right-wing freaks within his party, or, maybe it's some other wild card who like rises from the ranks and somehow magically, is able to pull together a coalition in order to be the next Speaker.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying